Amelie could still hear that cruel laugh echoing in her head, the one that made her heart sink. It happened one sunny afternoon in a little cafe in Durban. She and her best friend Lindy were having their usual lunch, or at least it used to be their usual before everything changed. Lindy leaned forward, stirring her iced coffee, and said with a smirk, "Amelie, you're too basic. No man wants a woman like you. You're not wife material." Amelie froze for a second, her spoon halfway to her mouth. She tried to laugh it off, pretending it didn't hurt. "You're so dramatic, Lindy," she said softly, forcing a smile. But inside something shattered. The words felt heavy, like stones dropped into her chest. She'd always known Lindy had a sharp tongue, but she never expected it to be turned against her. They had grown up side by side, same dusty roads, same schoolbooks, same teenage dreams about the future. Now Lindy sat there in her fancy clothes, flashing her diamond earrings, speaking like she was above her. Amelie looked down at her own hands. Plain nails, no jewelry, just the scent of soap from her morning shift. She wanted to say something to defend herself, but what was the point? Instead, she quietly reached for the bill, paid for both of them, and stood up. As she walked out, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I'm not wife material, but I'm real." And that truth, though small, began to heal the crack in her heart. Amelie's life was quiet, but it wasn't easy. She lived in a small one-room apartment in Umlotsi, where the sound of minibus taxis and children playing outside filled her evenings. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, made herself a cup of tea, and caught the bus to the city library. There, she worked as an assistant, shelving books, helping students, and smiling at strangers who rarely noticed her tired eyes. After work, she didn't rest. She'd rush home, tie her apron, and start her second job, making handmade soaps at her little kitchen table. Lavender, lemon, and rose scents filled the room as she mixed oils and poured them into molds. Her hands were often rough from the work, but she didn't mind. She believed in building quietly, without showing off, even when no one was watching. Her dream was simple but close to her heart, to open her own self-care store one day. A place where women like her could feel seen, appreciated, and beautiful in their own skin. She wanted to call it peace and pure. But whenever she shared her ideas with Lindy, her old friend would roll her eyes and laugh. "You dream too small, Amelie," she'd say. "Who even buys handmade soaps these days? You should think bigger." Those words used to hurt, but Amelie had learned not to argue. That night, sitting at her small desk surrounded by soap bars and ribbons, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I'm not wife material, but I'm trying to be life material." She smiled faintly, wiping away a tear. Outside, the rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window. Amelie looked at her little stack of packaged soaps and felt a strange warmth in her chest. She didn't have much, but she had purpose, and that was something money couldn't buy. As she placed the last soap into a delivery box, she didn't know that her life was about to take a turn she could never have imagined. The next order she packed, the next delivery she made, it would lead her straight into the path of someone who would see her not as basic or boring, but as everything he'd been searching for. And that someone would change everything, not just her life but how she saw herself forever. A few weeks later, Amelie's phone buzzed with a message from Lindy. "Family bray at my parents' house this weekend. You should come." Amelie stared at the screen for a long moment, unsure. After everything Lindy had said, she didn't really want to go. But part of her didn't want more tension between them, so she sighed and replied, "Okay, I'll be there." That Saturday, she arrived at the big house in Umhlanga carrying a small bowl of potato salad she'd made herself. The place was full of laughter and the smell of grilled meat. Expensive cars lined the driveway, and everyone looked polished, the kind of crowd that made Amelie feel out of place. Still, she smiled politely, greeting people she barely knew. As the sun dipped low, she found a quiet spot near the fire, watching the others talk and joke loudly. That's when she noticed him, tall, calm, and smiling easily as he helped an elderly aunt with her chair. Lindy introduced him casually. "Oh, that's my brother Thabiso." He reached out his hand, his eyes warm and kind. "So, you're Amelie. Lindy's told me about you." Amelie laughed softly. "I hope only good things." He grinned. "Mostly. But I like to make my own judgments." Throughout the evening, while others gossiped or took selfies, Thabiso seemed different. He noticed the little things. How Amelie quietly helped serve food, made sure everyone had a drink, and even thanked the helpers who worked behind the scenes. There was something genuine about her that drew him in. Later, as people started dancing and chatting in small groups, Thabiso found Amelie by the kitchen, helping clear plates. "Do you always take care of everyone but yourself?" he asked gently. Amelie looked up, surprised. "Someone has to," she said with a shy smile. He nodded slowly, still watching her. "That's rare, you know. Most people only notice themselves." She didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long while, someone saw her. Not her clothes, not her simplicity, but her heart. When she left that night, the air felt different. As she walked toward the taxi stand, she couldn't stop smiling. Something had shifted inside her. Quiet but strong. She didn't know it yet, but that one meeting would change the entire course of her life. Lindy had always been the center of attention, so when she saw her brother Thabiso laughing with Amelie at the brae, something inside her burned. From across the yard, she watched them. The way Thabiso leaned in when Amelie spoke, the gentle smile on his face, how he even walked her to her car when the night ended. Lindy's bright smile stayed frozen, but her jaw tightened. She couldn't believe her brother was actually giving attention to Amelie, the same basic friend she had mocked for years. The next morning Lindy called her. Her tone was sharp, sugar-coated with fake sweetness. "Hey, I just wanted to clear something up," she began. Before Amelie could answer, Lindy continued. "Don't get any ideas, okay? My brother likes classy women, not simple ones like you." Amelie held the phone quietly, her fingers trembling slightly. She could have defended herself. She could have reminded Lindy that real class isn't about clothes or money. But she didn't. She simply said, "I understand," and hung up. For a long time, she sat staring at her small shop space. Shelves filled with her handmade soaps, ribbons, and jars. Normally, Lindy's words would have cut deep, but this time, something was different. Instead of shame, Amelie felt peace. For the first time in her life, she realized she didn't have to prove her worth to anyone. Days later, while she was organizing her stock, the bell above her door chimed. It was Thabiso. "I need more soap for my mother," he said with a grin, holding a basket already filled with enough to last months. Amelie raised an eyebrow playfully. "Your mother must be bathing 10 times a day now." He laughed, shaking his head. "Maybe I just like supporting local businesses." They ended up talking for hours about work, faith, dreams, and the mistakes that shape people. Thabiso wasn't like most men she'd met. He listened. He cared. When Amelie spoke, he didn't interrupt or judge. He just looked at her like every word mattered. Each visit became longer than the last. What started as casual conversations began to feel like something deeper, something honest and rare. And while the world outside still measured worth by wealth and appearance, Amelie and Thabiso found something far more valuable, a connection built on respect, kindness, and truth. It was a quiet evening in Amelie's little shop. The smell of lavender and vanilla filled the air as she and Thabiso worked side by side, wrapping soaps and labeling boxes. He had offered to help her pack orders after work, and somehow, what was supposed to be a quick task had turned into their favorite routine. They laughed, teased each other, and shared little pieces of their lives, like two souls slowly finding home in each other's company. As Amelie reached for a roll of tape, Thabiso's voice broke the silence. "You know," he said softly, "Lindy once told me you're not wife material." Amelie froze, her hands still. For a second, she felt that old sting in her chest, the same one from that cafe months ago. "Oh," she whispered, trying to sound unbothered. "I'm not surprised." But before she could look away, Thabiso smiled, that calm, steady smile that always melted her defenses. "She was wrong," he said quietly. "You're more than wife material. You're peace material." Amelie blinked, caught off guard. And then, for the first time in a long while, she laughed, not the polite, quiet kind of laugh she used when she was uncomfortable, but a real one, full and free. The sound filled the room, and Thabiso just watched her, smiling like he'd found something precious. From that night on, things between them changed in ways neither of them could explain. Their friendship grew into something deeper, something unspoken but strong. Thabiso started coming by more often, not just to help, but because he wanted to be near her. He introduced her to his mother soon after. Amelie was nervous, her hands shaking as she brought a basket of her soaps as a gift. But Thabiso's mother, a gentle woman with wise eyes, took her hands and said, "You have a kind spirit, my child. No wonder my son can't stop talking about you." Those words brought tears to Amelie's eyes. For once she felt seen, not for what she lacked, but for who she truly was. Everyone around them could see their bond, the way their eyes found each other in a crowded room. Everyone, that is, except Lindy. To her it wasn't love, it was betrayal. Watching her brother fall for the woman she had mocked felt like a wound she couldn't hide. But no matter how hard she tried to interfere, the truth was simple. Love had already rooted itself deep between Amelie and Thabiso, and this time nothing could pull it out. When Thabiso finally told his family that he wanted to marry Amelie, the room went silent. His mother smiled softly, but Lindy's expression changed instantly. She blinked as if she hadn't heard right. "Marry who?" she asked, her voice sharp. Thabiso met her eyes calmly. "Amelie," he said simply. "She's the woman I love." Lindy's jaw dropped. Then came the explosion. "You can't be serious," she shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "She's using you, Thabiso. She's poor, uneducated, and jealous of me. How can she be good enough for you?" Her words hung in the air like poison. Everyone stared, stunned by her cruelty. But Thabiso didn't flinch. He looked at his sister with quiet strength and said, "She's the most genuine person I've ever met. She's not after money or status. She gives even when she has little. You could learn something from her." Lindy's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. "So you're choosing her over your own family?" she snapped. "I'm not choosing sides," he replied firmly. "I'm choosing love, real love." Unable to handle the humiliation, Lindy stormed out, her heels clicking against the tiles, her pride louder than her footsteps. She couldn't believe her boring friend, the same one she once mocked for being too simple, had captured her brother's heart. Later that evening, Amelie sat quietly beside Thabiso, her eyes filled with worry. "Thabiso," she whispered, "if this will cause problems with your family, I can walk away. I don't want to be the reason for any pain." He reached out and held her hand tightly, his voice steady. "Amelie, you're not breaking my family, you're healing it. You've reminded us what love and kindness look like." Tears welled up in her eyes. She had never been loved like that before. Not for her looks, not for what she had, but for her heart. That night, as they sat together in silence, the world outside seemed to fade away. Thabiso knew he'd found something rare. A love that wasn't loud but strong, not showy but sincere. And Amelie, for the first time in her life, finally believed that being herself was enough. Lindy's bitterness lingered in the background, but it no longer mattered. Because the more she tried to break them apart, the stronger their love grew, rooted not in wealth or appearance, but in truth. A few months later, Thabiso planned a small family dinner at a cozy restaurant in Umlanga. He told everyone it was just a simple gathering to celebrate his mother's birthday, but in his heart, he knew it was the night he would change Amelie's life forever. Amelie, as humble as always, wore a soft cream dress and minimal makeup. She didn't know what was coming. She thought it was just another family meal, though she could feel something different in the air. Thabiso kept stealing glances at her, his eyes filled with warmth, his hands slightly trembling every time he touched his pocket. The table was full of laughter and light chatter until Lindy walked in, late as usual. Her dress sparkled under the restaurant lights, and she wore that confident smirk she always carried like armor. When she saw Amelie sitting beside her brother, her smile stiffened, but she said nothing. Then, just as dessert arrived, Thabiso stood up. "Before we end the night," he began, his voice calm but steady, "there's something I want to say." Amelie looked at him, confused. He took her hand gently and dropped to one knee. The room fell silent. "Amelie," he said, eyes glistening, "you've brought peace into my life. You've shown me love that's patient, honest, and kind. Will you marry me?" Gasps echoed across the table. Even the waiters stopped moving. Lindy's fork clattered onto her plate. "You're proposing to her," she blurted out, her voice sharp with disbelief. "To her." Amelie's breath caught in her throat. Tears filled her eyes. Not from pride, but from pure disbelief. The same woman who was once told she wasn't wife material was now being asked to be someone's forever. She covered her mouth, shaking her head as if to make sure this was real. Then, through her tears, she whispered, "Yes." Thabiso slipped the ring on her finger, and the room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed as relatives captured the moment, but Amelie didn't see any of that. All she saw was Thabiso, the man who looked at her like she was more than enough, even when others said she wasn't. Lindy sat frozen, her smile gone. For the first time, she realized that everything she had mocked Amelie for, her simplicity, her softness, her quiet ways, were the very things that made her unforgettable. Amelie leaned into Thabiso's arms, her tears soaking his shoulder. It wasn't a fairy tale moment. It was better. It was real. By the next morning, Amelie's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her engagement photos had spread everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok. Someone at the dinner had recorded the proposal, and now the clip had gone viral. At first, Amelie didn't know how to feel. Her notifications were full of strangers' opinions. Some sweet, some cruel. Many people praised her for her simple beauty and natural grace. "She's so real," one woman wrote. "Finally, a love story that's not about money or looks." But others weren't so kind. "She looks too plain," one comment read. "He could do better." Another said, "She's just lucky. That's not love, that's pity." Amelie scrolled for a while, her chest tightening. It wasn't the first time she had been judged for being herself, but seeing it play out so publicly hurt more than she expected. And just when she thought it couldn't sting worse, she saw Lindy's post. Lindy had uploaded a glamorous selfie with a caption, "Some people get lucky, others just aim low." It was obvious who she was talking about. Thousands liked and shared it, turning the drama into gossip fuel. People started comparing the two women, the glamorous sister versus the simple fiancé. Amelie sat quietly in her small apartment, her ring glinting in the morning light. She could have clapped back. She could have written something angry or defensive. But instead, she took a deep breath and smiled softly. Then she opened her social media and posted just one sentence. "Peace looks good on everyone, even if it's not designer." Within hours, the post exploded. Her words spread like wildfire. Women from all over Africa began commenting, sharing their own stories, about being mocked for being too simple, too plain, too average. Messages flooded in. "You gave me courage. You reminded me that I don't have to be flashy to be enough. Thank you for being real." Amelie didn't care about the fame. She cared about the connection. For the first time, she realized her quiet strength wasn't something to hide. It was something powerful. Thabiso walked in later with flowers and his usual smile. "You broke the internet," he teased. Amelie laughed softly, shaking her head. "No," she said. "I think I just reminded people that peace never goes out of style." And for the first time in her life, she didn't just feel loved, she felt seen. The morning of the wedding was calm and golden. Sunlight slipped through the curtains as Amelie sat in front of the mirror, her hands trembling slightly. Her dress wasn't from a famous designer. It was handmade by the women from her community, stitched with care and love. Soft ivory fabric, gentle lace on the sleeves, and small details that told her story. Simple, pure, beautiful. When she stepped out of the car and walked toward the church, people turned to look, not because her gown sparkled, but because she did. There was something about her calm smile, her quiet confidence, that lit up the whole place. Inside, the music began to play. Amelie took a deep breath and started walking down the aisle, her heart pounding with every step. Her eyes met Thabiso's, steady, warm, full of love. He couldn't take his eyes off her. Halfway down, she passed by Lindy. Dressed perfectly as always, Lindy smiled tightly, pretending everything was fine. But Amelie saw the truth in her sister's eyes, pride mixed with regret. She leaned closer for just a second and whispered softly, "I wish you peace." Lindy froze, tears forming before she could even respond. For the first time, she realized Amelie wasn't fighting her anymore. She was freeing herself. At the altar, Thabiso reached out his hand, his voice shaking with emotion as he began his vows. "Amelie," he said, his eyes glistening, "you showed me what real love looks like. It's not loud, not shiny, not about the world watching. It's steady. It's honest. It's true." Amelie's eyes filled with tears. When it was her turn, she said quietly, "You saw me when I thought I was invisible. You made me believe that my kind of love was enough." The pastor smiled, his voice breaking slightly. "You may now kiss the bride." When Thabiso leaned in and kissed her, the hall erupted in applause. Some clapped, some cried, and even Lindy stood slowly, wiping her eyes. Cameras flashed, but Amelie didn't care. For once, it wasn't about the pictures, it was about the moment. As they walked out hand in hand, the crowd showered them with petals. The world outside might still chase sparkle and show, but inside that small church, everyone could feel it. Love didn't need glitter to shine. Amelie looked up at Thabiso, smiling through her tears. "We did it," she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. "No," he said softly, "you did." Months later, life had completely changed for Amelie. The little table she once used to pack orders had turned into a bright, cozy store on a busy street. The sign above the door read, "Peace and Pure," her dream brand, made for women who believed in being real, not perfect. The walls were filled with warm colors, soft music played in the background, and every product carried a small tag that said, "Peace looks good on everyone." Amelie moved through the store with calm confidence, greeting customers, helping young girls choose items that made them feel beautiful, not because they sparkled, but because they were honest, simple, and full of heart. One quiet afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the window, the door opened softly. Lindy walked in. She wasn't dressed in her usual fancy clothes. Just jeans, a plain blouse, and eyes full of humility. She looked around, her lips trembling slightly. "You proved me wrong," she said in a low voice. "You were wife material all along." Amelie paused, then gave a gentle smile. "No, Lindy," she said kindly. "I was always enough. You just couldn't see it." There was no anger in her tone, only peace. Lindy nodded slowly, tears shining in her eyes, and whispered, "I see it now." Before she could say more, a little girl came up to the counter, shyly handing Amelie a bracelet she wanted to buy. Amelie bent down, placed the bracelet in a small gift bag, and said softly, "Never let anyone tell you you're not enough, okay?" The girl smiled wide, her eyes glowing with hope. As the door closed behind them, the sunlight touched the sign outside. Simple doesn't mean small, it means strong. And in that quiet glow, Amelie finally knew. She had won not by being better, but by being true.